Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are here live at the College of Social Sciences for today's lecture, Theory of Society and Postmodern Epistemology, by the esteemed cultural critic and philosopher, Dr. Alex Taekwang Lee. My name is Franz Joseph C. Yoshi II of the Department of History and Philosophy, and I am honored to be your moderator for this morning's event. To officially begin our event for today, may I ask Professor Dr. Leia E. Abayo, Dean of the College of Social Sciences, to deliver her welcoming remarks.
Good morning. Good morning. Naimbag na agsapa, magandang umaga sa ating lahat. I'm very happy to see you all here, and to everyone who is joining us via YouTube live stream. Live stream already. And so I'm delighted to welcome you all to the 2023 CSS lecture series. We've had a number of lectures over the past month, and we are lucky to have engaged scholars from here and abroad. In February this year, we had Southeast Asianist Una Paredes of UCLA. And you will find the recording of this lecture at the CSS YouTube channel. These events have generated deeper interest in the social sciences among students and faculty. And so I am glad that we continue with this and with your questions and thinking. And today we are privileged to have the one and only Alex Taekwang Lee to lecture on theory of society and postmodern epistemology. Dr. Lee will engage us in thinking deeper about postmodernism. You've read the abstract, I suppose. I hope everyone will enjoy this platform for critical conversations and allow interdisciplinary inquiries to prosper. I am deeply thankful to the CSS Lecture Series Committee and the Faculty of Philosophy for proactively organizing today's lecture. And thank you so much, Dr. Lee, for coming to UP Baguio and doing this public lecture. I wish everyone a wonderful lecture and discussion with Dr. Lee. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dean Leia, for warmly welcoming our audience to the College of Social Sciences. Before we begin, kindly ensure that your mobile phones are switched to silent mode. We want to give our undivided attention to today's stimulating discourse. So, our speaker for today is a professor of cultural studies at Kyungsgi University, South Korea, and visiting professor at the University of Brighton. He is a member of the advisory board for the International Deleuze and Guattari Studies in Asia, and the board member of the International Consortium of Critical Theory Programs. Without further ado, please join me in giving a warm welcome to our distinguished speaker, Dr. Alex Taekwang Lee.
Thank you for quite kind introduction and then opening ceremony. I'm very happy to be here, and then thank you for having me. And then also actually this is my first time to visit Baguio, but I heard a lot about this city, and then I'm already impressed by the UP Baguio's this very bustling and energetic atmosphere, and I really love to see you all students in particular. And then I feel actually I'm quite feel that still alive, this spirit of study and academic, the passion that really had to deliver my talk, place like this. Thank you very much. So today, actually, I gave you this general title, understanding of the society, and then some epistemology. And my field is actually, the French philosophy and the German philosophy, mostly actually after the 1930s. So that's why I want to focus on some certain, philosophical discussion of, the epistemological understanding of a contemporary society. Then more like a theoretical approach to the so-called post-war, world system. So actually, for instance, actually, Gilles Deleuze and Kelly Slattery. Today I'm gonna talk about that. Those, the works, done by two philosophers, together, co-authored, the Antithesis and then Thousand Plato, and mostly actually focused on the Antithesis. And then, what I want to say is what we can learn, from the book, which was published in 1972. Actually, not many students, sitting here, not really actually recognize it, but 1970 was sort of, the period of turbulence, right? And then the Third World movement in the struggle against, the remnant of imperialism and the colonialism, the actual ranked high, and then many, the resistance. Today, most of them is forgotten, in particular Philippines and then South Korea and Japan, And then many places in Latin America and Africa, but now actually not many people actually mention it. And then now there is those areas called simply Global South, right? It's the term which replaced my preferable term, third word, okay? So, in Asia of extremes, you would know this, the historian, and Austrian historian, but he actually mostly worked in England, and the Eric Hobsbawm proposed the term, the short 20th century, to underscore the extreme experience of the century. Okay. This guy is Eric Hobsbawm. So the period Hobsbawm had in mind refers to 78 years between 1914 to 1991, which began with the First World War and ended with the collapse of the Soviet Union. The former Great War caused the fall of the German, Ottoman, and Austro-Hungarian and Russian empires, and influenced the outbreak of the Second World War. When the U.S. dropped the 2 atomic bombs upon Japan, it seemed that the war was finally finished, and that the Justice League of Allies had defeated the Pacifist Alliance, officially. But in Hobsbawm's estimation, however, the Second World War had barely ended when humanity plunged into what can reasonably be regarded as a Third World War. While Europe settled into post-war conditions, the war did not end in the Third War. Ironically, the end of the Great War meant the beginning of a civil war in the areas, so-called the Third World. For instance, Asia was the zone in which the two superpowers continued throughout the Cold War to compete for the support and influence and hence the major zonal function between them. Indeed, one where the armed conflict was most likely and actually broke out. End quote. The rise of a nation state belonging to the 19th century and the central theme of this century replaced the empire to become the crucial narrative of 20th century following the First World War. The residual issues revolving around the story of the empire were dominant then, but nationalism fueled by the collective desire to build a republic soon swept over much of the world. This dialectical process accelerated national liberation movement and the invention of a national identity. this republican spirit to establish a nation state against imperialism was related to sovereignty in international politics. The political situation of the Third World after the Second World War gave rise to the crisis central leadership within the communist parties. In the 1920s, the Communist International, Comintern, supervised the national parties to learn how to organize modern political groups and mobilize people. It's so-called a little bit, actually, the situation before the Second World War. And then also what we actually faced up at the moment in terms of post-war regime, in the so-called after the Cold War, and then we now live in the quite peaceful 30 years stabilization. And then, but anyway, just this actually regime is produced by this quite turbulent period, as I told you, and then the conflict between the Soviet Union and then some Europe and American capitalism. The thing is that this the conflict ended according to Hobsbawm. That period might be called according to Hobsbawm, but the short 20th century. So actually today, the Wang Hui, one of the preeminent Chinese intellectual, took this term and he actually tried to redefine the meaning of a short 20th century, and then he actually specified that this period and or redefined this the short 20th century, including Chinese Revolution. And it wasn't actually the Mao's Chinese Revolution, but the Xinhai the revolution is Sun Yat-sen's actually revolution in 1905. Anyway, so if you are interested, then check it with Wang Hui's argument. And then, so what now that I try to get into this the problem of that central region, all right, and then all those periods, both sides, or I mean actually communist, and then the force, and then the capitalist force try to centralize their own people. And then that might be some kind of the very hardcore the process. So National Liberation Front in Algeria, for instance, the central leading organization never successfully formulated and distributed a comprehensive political doctrine across diverse revolutionary groups. Actually, after Second World War, the Algerian War began, and then this actually the FLN is, the National the Liberation Front in Algeria, and then they actually, try to organize resistance against, the France, because France didn't give up their, control over the Algeria, even though in the end of the Second World War. So they organized the kind of resistance to demand, their independence, all right, and then there's the FLN. And of course, there's a commentary and a lot of, those the Soviet Union, supported, the FLN. But even the uneven degree of political development and radicalization have been observed in each branch. The young generation railed against the Central Committee for the absence of a proper communication and the lack of the precise orientation. The decentralized structure of the FLN made its political activity fall into the impasse of internecine rivalries among individuals and clans. What I want to say is that actually the order or some kind of order of resistance, or some kind of the attempt to organize this kind of the movement, or some resistance, from top to the bottom, intended to to actually centralization. That means the intended to the actually the promote centralization, to centralize this kind of the resistance. But actually, what happened and actually the situation of such a resistance is decentralized. A different group and a different clan, they compete each other, And then they actually made their own, tactic to attack, imperialism, just like that. I think this situation would be quite used to people in the Baguio. Actually, the very similar situation would have, in the history, as I heard. So this is actually a problem of in those days, actually the organization of this resistance. And then, of course, this is related to what I said. It's the kind of theory of the society, after that. So the readers perceive the decentralization of movement as a deficiency of political education, and they invoke the revolutionary discipline and the democratic centralism as a remedy for the inconsistency. And then this is actually Lenin's doctrine. The Lenin, actually the leader of the Russian Revolution, doctrine is called the centralism, but the democratic centralism. It does not mean that the Leninist mantra, the democratic centralism, is a strategic policy or failure. And for instance, the Church and the Pescatory do not insist that decentralization must replace centralization, but instead we got paradox between the centralization, decentralization, and transversality of a revolutionary situation. So what I mean actually, actually you can see that so-called postmodern thought always attack this kind of centralization, and then that was actually their own the excuse. We must, bring in this kind of postmodern thoughts in some sort of actually, the decentralization is quite necessary to revise, problem, the correct problem of, centralization or centralism. But, as you know, the Jerusalem got the Pescatory is occasionally regarded as a postmodern thinker, but they are not really actually, agree with that kind of idea. They didn't say that we should abolish the centralism and then we must adopt, the decentralization or some for more revolutionary or some for more, open mind, something like that. It doesn't mean like that. So this is what I mean. So this is exactly as what happened after, Second World War. You can see that this is the Third World. All right. Then, the Algerian Wars took place. All right, the Algerian Wars marked that the beginning of civil war according to Hobsbawm. And then that means that the Second World War, did not end. It actually transformed to another, the form of the warfare, the so-called war in the Third World. Actually the nuclear, and then Korean, we already actually had in a similar situation, after. Second World War, it doesn't mean the end of the world, but the beginning of another world. Another world. Actually, the American allegedly they didn't accept it, and then there is no actually clear evidence until today. Actually, the American commander came to the Jeju Island, is a southern part of Korea. The island is located in the southern part of the Korean Peninsula, and then they killed, a lot of people there, and then just right after the end of Second World War, that thing happening. Actually, a lot of civilian massacre took place, done by the kind of the military maneuver. So, and then actually the another side of this globe is you can see that this Algerian war is burst out, and then. All right. So, you can read this one. I don't read, this quotation. So, drawing on actually the Deleuze, actually put forward this kind of idea, so-called the postmodern thinker. But I don't think actually Deleuze is in such a way, the postmodern thinker. What I mean actually, as we know that a lot of Marxists and then other there's some revolutionary theorists criticize postmodernism, but I don't think there is some such kind of clear distinction between modernism and postmodernism, because modernism and postmodernism are quite aesthetic concept. It's not really ontological, and it's not really epistemological concept. It's not. That's why just today my talk is gonna, deliver some kind of counter evidence to this kind of common sense, revolving around this, the distinction between modernism and postmodernism. So you can see that, this is what Deleuze said in the practice to the Guattari's book. All right, drawing on Guattari's political experience of oppositional, because Guattari was a militant, right, belonging to the French Communist Party. So without French Communist Party, you couldn't understand the French philosophy in 1960s. So actually, what we call something like postmodernism, actually related to this the post-war, the French philosophy, mostly actually the attempt to revise the Marxism, all right, and then in the face of this Algerian war, a lot of radical students, the French students in those days, they converted to Maoism. They actually brought Maoism into the French context, the so-called French Marxism rose. And then, but of course, Deleuze and Guattari took another side. It's not really Maoist, and in particular, Guattari was Trotskyite, right? So oppositional is sort of small groups within the French Communist Party, mostly actually the students, university students participate in these small groups, and then they demanded, actually, the innovation or some transformation of French Communist Party, because French Communist Party in those days, they're controlled by commentary. Follow that the doctrine of the Communist International. That's why actually, of course, it's influenced by the centralism, so-called democratic centralism. And then on top of this democratic centralism, who was there? Stalin. So actually, you know what I mean? Actually, this kind of situation. Why this actually the radical French communist students, the demand, the change of the French Communist Party must cut line, with Stalin, and then what? You should pay attention to what's actually happening and local. That is actually what they demanded. That's why they, adopted the Maoism. Not like actually the party line. But you must change your party line according to what? The demand from bottom. Actually, the local mass or the mass movement is you must focus on that. That is what they did. And then this kind of demand is the foundation of French philosophy in 1960. And then a theoretical foundation. All right. So that is actually the new idea of society. It means that, I'm sorry about the student in social science. This theory argues that there is no society. Or is it only completion, or the antagonism, all right, or some class difference, right? In the Deleuze and Guattari argue differences, differences actually there. And then there are multiplicity, so-called substance there. This is mathematical term. Multiplicity. Actually, all things is grown from simple one to what? Multiple one. All right. That means if you start, anything from quite a single point, but when it goes on and goes on, what happens? It's gotta be split, many things. That is a logical multiplicity. That is what actually the adopted when he argue is a philosophical, theorem. This is I'm gonna explain later on. And then he adopted it. He applied this idea for understanding society and the political, movement. So, considering this argument, it is clear that Deleuze does not oppose centralism to spontaneism, but rejects the theory of development stage. So, actually, I just simply put down the single sentence, but this sentence implicated the many, actually the years and of discussion over that issue, the central the organization or spontaneity, So which one is actually the power of the, actually, which one is actually, igniting power for the revolution? Is the discussion or debate between the Rosa Luxemburg and then, actually the Lenin, and the Lenin won this game and then, they can now have a democratic center. But the truth actually, of course, influenced by Guattari, as you told you that, Guattari is a Trotskyite, that actually Guattari tried to emphasize spontaneity of the revolution, not really organized process, So the Stalin, of course, actually, this guy is quite rational, right? He trusted, the evolutionary the process, and then he believed that socialism is superior to the capitalism. That's why the victory of socialism is necessary. That is what Stalin believed. Almost, today we can see that is almost like, the religious faith, But in those days he believed. Anyway, so, but actually the purpose of Deleuze Guattari and then the so-called postmodern thought in general, but I don't agree with this term. But anyway, what is the meaning of postmodern? In my opinion, that is anti-imperialism, anti-colonialism, right? That means actually postmodern. Of course, this actually term is such a quite overused, abused by so-called the American academia or some discipline, but I don't want to blame them. It's another use of this kind of theory, in my opinion. I don't blame. I don't say we must reject postmodernism and we must restore the authentic meaning of the French philosophy. I don't say like that. Theory is a toolbox according to Deleuze, and then also this theory toolbox is from where is the Marcel Proust, Marcel Proust actually made this term. And then so theory is toolbox. You can use that tool any purpose, all right? That is, in my opinion, is a multiple use of a theory. And then let students use it. And then there is no any single, original meaning. Of course, there might be original meaning, but students can use it in different purpose, and that's practice. So that's actually what Deleuze Guattari emphasized, through their own actually the working. So that is a reason why the Deleuze and Guattari must be quite one of the most important French philosophers, in 20th century. Yeah. So Deleuze actually you can see that in quotation by this acceptance of Guattari's concept of transversality. It's like the meaning of transversality could be rephrased as milieu. Milieu is a sort of middle stage, or some kind of, this sort of medium. It's not like actually, the Hegelian sense of mediation. Of course, Hegel also presupposed mediation, in my opinion, like this, some sort of struggling, among differences, all right? And then it's a kind of milieu is more like, also the containing some psychical dimension as well, milieu. The one you think is actually, the power by which you can change the world. How can you change the world? You must imagine it first. Otherwise, impossible. You must imagine it. That means that the world started to be changed. That is actually what Deleuze and Guattari said, and then lots of philosophers argue. Anyway, so Deleuze reaffirms the asymmetrical synthesis of organization and the fundamental condition of revolution, as he does in different repetition and the logical sense. So this is my argument. If I carefully read, these two books, quite difficult book anyway, repetition and the logical sense. A logical sense might be better because it it deals with many the literary works. It's very easy to get it. But different repetition is quite difficult. It's quite a mathematical book, actually. You're tackling thermodynamic theory. So this is different repetition, but actually the both book quite difficult, but what he tried to say is quite simple. All right, why is that? He argued that revolution is necessary, impossible. And these two books actually influenced Guattari. Guattari was actually originally Lacanian. And his church guide, he's militant, but he was quite frustrated by that French Communist Party, and he was frustrated by his colleagues. He almost, committed suicide, something like that. He was some psychic, the crisis. Yeah, but he read these two books, and then he found some visionary, the idea, and then he decided to meet Luz. That's actually this book is influenced Guattari. Some actually the critics said Guattari ruined Toulouse, but in my opinion, it's Guattari saved Toulouse. Toulouse himself content. Guattari saved me. If I have more time, I will explain later. All right, why? He actually Toulouse continued to explain how the unification of singular political forces comes about in the early occasion of revolution and how it practiced the later occasion. So in two books in a different repetition and the logical sense, I'm quite the courageous to argue this is a book about the revolution. What kind of revolution? Of course, not a classical sense of revolution. Of course, actually, including a classical sense of revolution, but you know that today's society not allow that kind of classical sense of revolution. Because we don't have any longer a kind of working class industrial society, concentrated workplace. We don't have that. Today's working place is decentralized, right? Decentralized. Even through the pandemic, you can see that platform capitalism. They don't allow concentrated the working class, all right? So that's what I mean. It doesn't mean actually okay, you shouldn't actually pursue that kind of classical sense of revolution. It doesn't mean that. It said this condition is changed, and then this condition does not allow a kind of classical sense of revolution. And how we can affirm, the sense of revolution? That's actually his question. The real question. No, because he observed failure of Stalinism. Even 1950, and then 1960, it seemed quite clear. It seemed quite clear. That means the Soviet Union seemed quite failed quite clearly. But that's why he defended, this failure. That's what Deleuze said in his interview. That is a very famous, the expression. He said, everybody knows evolution failed. Or some gonna be failed. History tells. Everybody knows that. But people said, okay, revolution failed because according to Deleuze, revolution always fails. That is a natural law. I just like that. It's a rain drops, and everybody knows that rain drops from the sky to the land. Everybody knows, and then said, okay, revolution fails. So to attempt to revolutionize the world is stupid. Everybody said like that. The Deleuze criticized rain drop from sky to the land, and that's why you shouldn't actually you shouldn't know that, and you shouldn't resist that. That is exactly what the Deleuze said. The necessity of revolution. Revolution is always prepared. But this current system, this current regime, try to what? Try to actually suppress the necessity of revolution. That's actually the Deleuze logic of it. And he tried logic of the revolution and then tried to justify this necessity of revolution philosophically. That's why he needed philosophy. So the okay, just let's go through. in other words, the unification is not the role of the synthesizer operating through rationalization, totalization, exclusion, but of an analyzer with respect to the desire of a group and the message. It's going to be quite clear. I already explained it, that, the unification, that means the centralization aims at unification, but what Lou said, not such a way in like, the democratic centralization, but another way, according to Lewis. What is that? The unification, must be often analyzed with respect to the desire of a group and the message. So if you want to be a revolutionary, what you must be analyzer of, desire. The desire of the group and the message. So according to this kind of understanding, they wrote two books, Anti-Oedipus and Thousand Plato. And then actually, that Anti-Oedipus Thousand Plato is not the main title. Actually, that's the subtitle. The main title is the Capitalism in Schizophrenia. That's the main title. And then two books. The Capitalism and the Schizophrenia 1 is Anti-Oedipus, and the Capitalism and Schizophrenia 2 is 8,000 Plato. I prefer the 80,000 Plato much, but it's also quite difficult to follow. But anyway, the last chapter of Anti-Oedipus discusses this issue by focusing on the difference between the molar machine and the molar machine means actually in the Deleuze-Guattari sense, a social, technical, or organic, the system, all right? And then the desiring machines, which are of a molecular order. These two states of machines are inseparable. The double-layered machines, which cannot account for their origin, serve as an extrinsic opposed to each other. The machine taken in its structural unity, the living taken in its specific, even personal unity are mass phenomena or molar aggregates. Desiring machines determine social, technical, organic machines, and vice versa. So actually, why did they introduce this quite ambiguous term machine? Of course, this is a Guattari term originally. Because actually in those days when they wrote this book, structuralism is quite dominant in France. And then I did actually deliver this lecture in the Santo Tomas in Manila, actually the cybernetics and information theory. It's another long story. Anyway, just try to simplify it. And then, after the Second World War, great American mission, I don't know why they have been obsessed in such a mission, anyway. Still quite mysterious, enigma for me. But I'm still digging into it as a kind of causality, why they did that. But they are supported, in those days, FBI, before the birth of the CIA. That's why the FBI supported actually some, scholar in France, and then Rockefeller, Foundation, and in Asia also they did that similar one. Because they were very cautious of the expansion of Soviet Union. I think that is one of the reasons they supported, these third world people. In those days, France, announced that they're gonna go to the third way between, Soviet Union and America. That's why actually they try to, actually strategically, the attract, those, the academics in France, and one of them was Lévi-Strauss. They support Lévi-Strauss. Ironically, Lévi-Strauss is a communist, and then that's why actually the FBI reported, the Hoover, founder of CIA. Oh, this is a commie. How could we actually support this communist? And then anyway, just the purpose of their plan, what is so-called the Marshall Plan, the Rockefeller, the actual foundation support, was that to attract, the people in the third zone. That's why they decided to support, Lévi-Strauss. And then that's why Lévi-Strauss went to New York. He met Roman Jakobson, Roman Jakobson, another guy from the Russia, his exile, all right, Russian exile. And Roman Jakobson, of course, he's a linguist, all right? And he involved this kind of cybernetic reading group, research group, cybernetic research group. And then through actually Roman Jakobson, Levi-Strauss, came across the cybernetic theory and the information theory. That is exactly the way in which he founded so-called structuralism. And against this, post-structuralism came up. In particularly, what? Jacques Derrida. Okay. Also, there is also, the Gilles Deleuze and the Guattari, also the so-called post-structuralism. And then, if you understand this background, you would quite easily understand what post-structuralism means. Critique of structuralism. What does that mean? Critique of what? Cybernetic and information theory. From this kind of perspective, if you read, two books I already mentioned, the Deleuze two books, Different Repetition and Logical Sense, you could find out how Deleuze tried to attack or some. Of course, it's not really actually the content sense of critique, but really the try to deal with this actual cybernetic, the theory and the information theory. That's why actually in Different Repetition, most of what the chapter in the book discussed, the how thermodynamic theory controlled our unconscious, just like that. That is actually what one of the persons he wrote that book. Interesting thing is that the Different Repetition is Gilles Deleuze, dissertation. The PhD thesis. So anyway, it's a long story. Anyway, that's why just if I said post-structuralism, that means the critique of structuralism. And Jacques Derrida was one of the first, the philosopher who attacked, the structuralism, and then quite interestingly, he used that mathematical theory to attack, the Levi-Strauss. And then anyway, so the determinate condition of machines are those statistical forms into which the machines enter as so many stable forms, unifying, structuring, and proceeding by means of large, heavy aggregates. The selective pressure that group the parts, retain some of them, and exclude others organized in the crowds. End quote. This actually, the expression or statement show that what machine was designed to replace the Levi-Strauss concept of structure. According to Levi-Strauss, the Levi-Strauss concept of structure, the structure means coding, right? It's a kind of exchangeable, the system, communication or linguistic exchange according to actually the Levi-Strauss. But because Levi-Strauss tried to ground in his theory on the Jakobson's concept of language, because Jakobson was regarded as some founder of that the science of language. Of course, and he rediscovered socialism, programming socialism, to justify his research. But actually, Jakobson is actually the theorist who elaborates the so-called linguistics, and then based on the cybernetic theory. And then, that's why actually the Levi-Strauss, the concept of the structure rely on this the linguistic discovery or linguistic theory. So, but attacking this one, and then the Deleuze and Guattari, suggested this concept of machine. The machine contains, procedure, rather than the kind of coding or rather than focusing on the structure, which was already produced by the kind of process. And then by taking this, concept machine, they try to focus on the process of that kind of, the coding. It's not the coding as such, but the sort of actually the process. They try to focus on emphasize that process very important in the that means actually the difference is very important, and then the kind of continuation of the differences. In other words, in my own term, is a production of differences important. In Deleuze sense, the production of importance is quite a Spinoza's concept, and then they're not which can replace the concept of the Hegelian concept of negation, the difference, all right? So difference is actually, according to the Deleuze, is the power of a change. So this is a quite difficult concept, but I try to clarify later on. So what brought Deleuze to Guattari a concept of a machine, if that is the case, as is well known, Deleuze's impression of Guattari's argument in machine and structure ended up as their collaboration. In the essay, Guattari strives to clarify the distinction between machine and structure, even though he acknowledges the fact that a machine is inseparable from its structural articulation. The Guattari points out that the machine lacks the agent of action, whereas structure includes it. For him, the subject is always somewhere else, and the machine and the emergence of the machine marks a date, a change different from structural representation. This is what exactly, the Derrida criticized Levi-Strauss structuralism, all right? When the Derrida criticized structure, the Levi-Strauss concept structure, and then he said, who actually produced that structure? The structuralism said there is no subject, there is no original subject. But the Derrida said if it is, the exchange between the language sign, the one I mentioned, linguistic sign, if you actually stay in the level of the language, somebody must speak. Just like that. If you said, this is quite you that quite used to this kind of neuroscientific, the idea, the brain thinks, all right? Brain thinks, and then neuroscience already teaching. They're teaching us that brain thinks, not you. And then if you could say the brain thinks, and then who thinks actually the brain thinks? Somebody else must observe brain thinks, and then they would say brain thinks. So, right? Who is that? If you're Catholic, you would say, okay, God would observe that. That's all we can prove it, right? That is exactly Derrida's question. The structure, okay, it's a scientific term of some kind of coding, communication, sort of, some cultural, the production, a theoretical foundation of that. And then how could you actually prove it without agent? Agent. That is actually the Derrida's question. So, and actually the Guattari's one is similar. Guattari's question also quite similar. And he attacked, the structuralism. Of course, Levi-Strauss rejected, the human agency in the structure. Structure actually decides the human agency block. That is actually the structuralism. But if there is some theoretical, the lack or theoretical, actually follows there. That's why they try to find out, the alternative way to the structure, and that's the post-structuralism. And according to, the Guattari, it was not a human agency. What is a desire? That is a machine, according to, the Guattari. That is what's a relationship. Desire is not the simple you desire. Desire already produced by a relation. Of course, Lacan said that the relation between object and the subject. That is what Lacan tried to say. But anyway, Guattari developed or elaborate this idea further, and the desire has its own object. Desire has itself as its opposite. It's like the Spinoza's sense of the substance. Desire can define itself by desire. That's actually what Plato said. So this is a machine. It's sort of a relation, all right? In quite Spinoza's sense. It's Spinoza's sense of relation, all right? Etiology. The desire would, the works together, and then of course it actually has its own cause. It doesn't have any cause outside of its own, desiring. So desiring actually cause is desiring. That's actually what catastrophic machine. So how do they actually apply this idea for understanding society? This is what actually my point today I try to deliver. So the Guattari's early concept of machine, which is supposed to be excluded from the structure of representation or substitution, retained the psychoanalytic framework. His model of a machine was not yet entirely against the Lacan formulation, as he argued that human work today is merely a residual subcode of the work of a machine. This notion already regards human work as the object of the art. Actually the Lacanian sense of object of the machine. Something about something, not the little other as such is a desiring machine. This is quite philosophical, discussion. You should know that the French philosophy in 1960 tried to clarify the condition of something. That's why they criticize the phenomenology. Always actually the Deleuze and Guattari, even the Derrida, criticize phenomenology. Why? Phenomenology only presupposes something over something. Thinking of the something. The phenomenology already presupposes object is outside somewhere. And then if you think about some object, it means you already presuppose there is something of something. Even we got the concept of something. But that is exactly what Deleuze and Guattari and including us and post-structuralists try to deconstruct. And then something has exists. How can I say this? The alone, independently. The thing as such exists, independently. And then, of course, independently, but this independence is depending on other independence. This is a relation, all right? This is the meaning of the multiplicity and the meaning of the substance. And they try to reinterpret. Of course, it's not the orthodox reading of Spinoza. A lot of actually Spinoza expert text is reading anyway. But actually they reinterpret the Spinoza and concept of society. Why? They try to understand due condition of society in those days. Of course, it's not existence, no existence society. There exists only substance. All right. So, in my opinion, Guattari provided Deleuze with the insight into the possible integration of his philosophy and politics after May 1968. Deleuze himself confirmed that Guattari is an amazing philosopher, particularly when he was talking about politics or about music. Deleuze's anti-humanism tacitly allied his philosophical trajectory with Althusser's reading of Marx after his disillusionment with Sartre. There is some debate between Althusser and Sartre about the relation between humanism and anti-humanism. Of course, Althusser supported anti-humanism, and this is another philosophical actually the history. In the 1960s, Sartre and Althusser were leading figures who occupied two poles of French Marxism. Both philosophers agree with the absence of a theory in the French Communist movement. Sartre stressed that sclerosis of the theory and the Marxist practice, which brought forth the conflict between the revolutionary action and the scholastic the justification of action, which prevents communist demand in socialist country as in bourgeois countries from achieving any clear self-consciousness. According to him, self-awareness gained from the theorization of totality can let the communist movement live with history and change again identity. Similarly, Althusser deplored French misery that consists of a stubborn, profound absence when a real theoretical culture and the history of the French workers' movement. However, Althusser's disagreement with Sartre resided in the way in which the external philosopher defined Marxism as the absolute horizon of our time. Sartre saw Marxism as a theory limited to the specific period of history, capitalism. On the contrary, Althusser thought of Marxism as a science which is not retrained to its historical epoch. When writing differential repetition and the logic of sense, Deleuze was more inclined toward Althusser rather than Sartre. But he, of course, actually he confessed that Sartre was his teacher, right? He's one of a role model. But when he wrote, these two books, different repetition and logic of sense, his inclination toward, Althusser, anti-human. And then, right? So, Althusser invited Deleuze to teach in 1964. In 1964, Althusser invited Deleuze to teach at École Normale Supérieure, is Ains. In his letter to Althusser in response to the book sent by him, Deleuze wrote that concept of problem, the fetish, and the analysis of acceptable of alienation all seem so important to me that I sense their influence. Deleuze's essay, how do we recognize structuralism, was also written in resonance with Althusser. This is another very important text if you understand how Deleuze understood structuralism. As it has been discussed, Deleuze regarded Althusser as a structuralist then, though his concept of a structure was incomparable to the major understanding of structuralism. However, Deleuze recognized the limits of psychoanalysis when he worked on the logic of sense, while Althusser took a step to come to with a possible foundation of anti-humanist Marxism through the reformulation of Freud and Lacan. So, this is actually the history of. Alright, so this is the difference repetition and logic of sense, the finding, and then also this is the Antiquus of that, and then okay, this is actually what they try to explain the, how the kind of centralization can come along with the decentralization in Antiquus. And you can see that this is a sort of the full body with an organ that is substance, right? That substance, all from top to bottom. You can see that all actually attribute in the single, the individual, entity. From the beginning, goes, so-called the substance. That is multiplicity, and that is, of course, according to Lacan, that is what that's right. Right? That's right. They Freud, define it. And in Lacanian sense, might be juice. They try to enjoy every, pleasure. Think about it. If you enjoy every pleasure, it means you're gonna die. You drink, all alcohol in supermarket, you're gonna die. You actually obsessed in exercise. You actually, enjoy all exercise, you're gonna die. That is actually the what. According to Lacan, that is truth. But the Deleuze and Guattari's position is a little bit similar to Lacan, but quite different. And what they say is a formation of your life. So your life is always in the process of extension. Your life is always extending towards, the bigger, what I call this space, temporal, spatial temporality, whatever actually you live, you're born in the certain, the hometown, and now that you actually came to, the Baguio or some Manila or some New York and somewhere, your life is gonna be extended. You don't know why, but you would live like that. like a Lulu, traveling whole world. At the end of your life, you would experience, as much as you can. That is life. That is actually Deleuze's position. It's a philosophy of affirmation. Quite different, yeah. It seems like they talk a similar thing, but they actually the conceptualize quite different idea. I love this kind of philosophical debate. Anyway, so all right. So this one. All right. So logical sense. The argue. All right. You can read this one. Is I quoted from logical sense. Deleuze, the insist in logical sense is pointing out the problem or limits of psychoanalysis, and it is not difficult to find out the fact that the seed of Antitypus lessons as early as this time. I mean, when he wrote logical sense, you can find out, the discussion fully developed in Antitypus. Antitypus is actually aimed at to criticizing psychoanalysis, revealing the problem of psychoanalysis. And the Deleuze discloses the weakness of psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis is fertile when its analysis is applied to the work of art, and the analysis cannot be achieved by treating authors. That's why we need a literary study. He actually justified why we read the literature, but psychoanalysis cannot understand, the literary text. That means the psychoanalysis cannot analyze literary text. Why? Because some author desire already, escaping from the text. And text is actually a record of that kind of escaping from the psychoanalytic, framework. That is what Deleuze said. And one of the remarkable book is that the Masochism. His book on the Masochism. But the thing is that Lacan quite praised that book when that book was published. Jacques Lacan loved that book, Masochism. And then he actually, Deleuze actually recorded in the social philosopher who discovered, the new aspect of the Masochism, And then, because in those days, there's a lot of people actually, the belief that Masochism is a supplement to sadism. That's why they use that the sadomasochism. But the Deleuze, they discovered the independent, the principle of masochism in the book. That's why he was regarded as, some contributor to development of psychoanalytic theory. But this is quite ironic. He criticized the psychoanalysis, but he was regarded as, the contributor to development of psychoanalysis. So Deleuze's analysis of masochism through Jacques Mazoc literature is a significant challenge to psychoanalysis, and the proof that something is escaping from the established psychoanalysis framework in the work of art. Deleuze stresses something unidentified within literary space, even though its structure seems dominated by the Oedipus myth. For this reason, he argues that authors themselves are astonishing diagnostician or symptomatologists. Doubtlessly, the Deleuze seeks to substitute psychoanalysis for Nietzsche's symptomatology. He clarifies that there is always a great deal of art involved in the grouping of symptoms and the organization of a table, where a particular symptom is dissociated from another, juxtaposed to the third, and forms the new figure of a disorder or illness. Here you can find out why Deleuze, celebrate the art, almost equal to the philosophy of science. For him, the art and the literature, or this kind of aesthetic practice is what? The symptomatology in Nietzschean sense. It shows that symptom. And what is symptom? Symptom is like a taboo. I mean, the taboo is a table. Tableau, what I mean actually the picture or is the cinema screen, all right, which shows, the trace of a desire. According to actually Deleuze, that is a madness. That the symptom is always shows the madness, our desire. Why is that? Because you are actually all mad, compared to other animals. You are sitting here already. I just, the time passed already 1 hour. You couldn't actually let, any, dog and the cat, on this theater, for 1 hour. You cannot do that. You cannot do that. They cannot sit on. They cannot sit on the, this, the auditorium for 1 hour. So that is what I mean. Like human animal as such is the madness of animality. So that is exactly a human being has a desire. All right, and then this desire is a madness. And according to Nietzsche is the made this concept first. The symptomatology, the literature and the art, the symptomatology, which is so that the human being madness toward the object, something like that. That is the desire. So, anyway, just from this actual perspective, Deleuze developed his social theory, and then also he said not only some kind of knowledge or scientific knowledge or some sociological knowledge, whatever called this knowledge, but also this kind of artistic practice, would tell something about so-called society, but in preferable term, in Deleuzian sense, what is the movement? We will show that, that kind of how our relations, and the produce the kind of differences, and the kind of process. That is what he said. So, all right. So for Deleuze, the critique of psychoanalysis is very important for the analysis for capitalism. Why? According to Deleuze, this capitalism, the late capitalism already was combined the academic logic with the psychical, the field. So actually that is the Keynesian economy. You can see the Keynes was the expert in Freud. He wrote even the biography of Freud, Keynes, and then Keynesian actually economics show that is today's economy cannot come to exist without psychology. So this is the reason why he said today's capitalism always come along with psychology, and then that's why psychoanalysis cannot surmount or deconstruct this problem. And then psychoanalysis cannot get, dig into this core of the capitalism, main capitalism. That's why actually he criticized psychoanalysis. So Deleuze and Guattari point out against this dominant analysis of capitalist production. Deleuze and Guattari points out the third realm of the paradox in the libido economy. From this point of view, they insist that the libido becomes unconsciously invested in ways that are distinct from the ways interests are pre-consciously invested, but that impinge on the social field, knowledge that invested interest. Actually, a lot of the statistics research about the kind of consumer orientation argue that this kind of the public opinion reflects today's some consumers' attitudes to buy purchase some kind of a commodity. But according to Deleuze and Guattari, the kind of the theory statistic data already pre-consciously given. It does not find out any the evidence in real actually the consumers the behavior. What actually they aim here. Today is actually the capitalist the editing, economics or sociology, whatever called is management theory. All these kind of the capitalist edifice aims at persuading us this is science, right? And by actually presenting some kind of statistic data. And then Deleuze and Guattari said that data already pre-consciously given. and then there is no evidence, and then no way to prove that is true. This is what actually, Deleuze and Guattari argue, and then this is also the problem of so-called the modern theory of governance. All right. For instance, Thomas Hobbes, he adopted Galileo Galilei, the physics, and then to what is theorize the modern, the logic of a modern governance, is the so-called Leviathan. And then, the Hobbes said, Galileo Galilei didn't see how you actually, the things, the work in the kind of physical process. That means the Galileo Galilei already calculated that the process, and then actually he take the kind of data from quite intensive experiments, and then he combined that data, and then he actually synthesized. All right, but that's why the Deleuze said that synthesize always asymmetrical, representation and then the kind of object always presuppose some kind of asymmetrical relation. That means there is a gap between the kind of data and then actual real movement. You know what I mean? This is we cannot see, how the kind of object moves in reality. You need what? Instruments. You cannot actually see that the Mars. You cannot see the the universe. But you know that there is the universe, how it look like, color, Mars, and then actually some kind of James, the telescope show you actually kind of some image of some galaxy, another galaxy. But you know that what you can get in reality is not such a kind of image, but what? Numbers, statistics. And then actually they transform the number to image. This process. And then how do they produce this kind of image? According to Deleuze and Guattari, that image as such is forgiven. How is it possible? Okay, you actually observe each the planet. And based on the kind of solar galaxy, solar system, and then you can extend the imagination to the another galaxy. You know what I mean? Just like that, you actually analyze yourself according to Deleuze and Guattari. You actually analyze the individual, Today's sociology like that. Analyze some quite intensive, the example, and then extend, that's actually the data to what? The general group of people. That is what? That is logic of empiricism. And then that is the logic of what? Patriarchism. Do you know what I mean? They presuppose is Foucault already pointed out, first of clinic. What is that? Normal man means, the male, white man. So white male is actually standard of human being. And then Filipino and the Korean, all these agents of the I don't know if we are Asian or not. Anyway, just no one knows. We have a different name, before their arrival. Anyway, we actually the non-European, actually our existence, defined by something subtracted from this standard. That is empiricism. That is exactly Deleuze-Guattari criticize. Now, this is actually the new perspective to social theory. And this is, in my opinion, exactly postmodern, so-called anti-imperialist or anti-colonial, epistemology of today's world. You must think about this. They attack the psychoanalysis and then writing the kind of the Anti-Oedipus, and then all actually this idea is actually shared by other the French philosopher in 1960s. What did they aim to do? Definitely bring in alternative world to this so-called modern society, towards modern world, which was founded by, enlightenment. And it doesn't mean actual rejection of the enlightenment, but what? It extends or revise, that concept of enlightenment. And what kind of enlightenment we should bring in today? We must actually discuss this topic, and we need to reconsider, what they achieved or what they failed in life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lee, for that thought-provoking and intellectually stimulating lecture. You have provided us with profound insights into what you call as postmodern epistemology and how we should theorize about society in this age. So now it's time for the question and answer session. Please keep your questions concise and focused to allow for as many participants as possible. So let us make the most of this invaluable opportunity. Okay, so I'll be going around. So if you have a question, please raise your hand so that I can provide you with the microphone.
Anyone?
Yes, sir. Sir, kindly introduce yourself and then your question.
I'm Francis Soliano. I'm from Ateneo. Thank you, Alex, for the lecture. I want to make a thought experiment and ask my question. So, for Newton, the apple falls to the ground because of this force called gravity. For Einstein, it's because of space-time curve, something like that. So, if we are to imagine ChatGPT to be existing already during the time of Newton, and so its answer would always be a Newtonian answer, right? No matter, is that correct? No matter how advanced that artificial intelligence is, it would always answer a Newtonian answer to that question because all input that will be provided for it are Newtonian. So my question is, if that is correct, what made Einstein, get out of the system and give his different answers? So what makes maybe human thinking different from just input-output kind of template?
Thank you. All right, thank you for the good question. Yeah, it's I think in the age of artificial intelligence, in particular at ChatGPT, we need to reconsider what the French philosopher said, because this actually the artificial intelligence already developed, 1940s. Also, during a war, they actually developed this technology to protect themselves. Who? American military, forces actually the developed this idea. There was cybernetics and then information theory, and based on this, actually the quite a primitive, a theory actually now that we have. Actually, not much changed anyway, but anyway, this on surface they look quite changed more like a human being. I think that is exactly this artificial intelligence already presuppose our human being desire, but we wanna create our double. Who actually made this discourse into Korean Christianity? I think in this world, only Christianity have this kind of story. God made, Probably from the Egypt and then, the ancient Greek. Anyway, the raw materials, made human being and looking at his own shape, something like that. And then also the Christianity is spread its story. And then now that we have in Philippines and Korea and then even non-European have similar story. That means we have a desire to create ourselves or something looking out to ourselves. This is, in my opinion, identity, the obsession. Why? Because that's why I think Spinoza is quite correct, the substance, right? We want to find out coherence in the middle of chaos. And the only thing we can find out some, the ground in the middle of the chaos is ourselves. But thing is that this ourselves as such is always open to what? Multiplicity. You know what I mean? If you think about yourself, you are actually sitting here. I'm always taking this example. You are sitting here as a certain person, but think about that. Actually, what you were yesterday, when you were actually 10 years ago, when you were actually 20 years ago, a different person would come up in your memory. Even checking on your actual photo, you can find out, oh my gosh, this is me, 10 years ago. That is exactly, you are changing. That is multiplicity. You are always changing. And then, but you wanna, find out some coherence of your life. This chaotic, the multiplicity. From this chaotic multiplicity, you try to bring in some coherence, but actually, the process of, the movement is reversed from the coherence to what? Chaos. So what is a science? Of course, actually, the Einstein's obsession is quite different. Einstein's obsession is to try to find out coherence because that is science. But what about, the quantum mechanics? It goes a different way. I think actually the 1960s already actually this philosophy were influenced by this the scientific theory. For instance, Kant is influenced by Newton. Kantian philosophy is grounded on the Newtonian physics. And then I told you the Hobbesian political philosophy grounded on the Galileo Galilei's physics. And then actually Deleuze Guattari and then 1960 actually French philosophy grounded on quantum physics. So actually they open to this kind of scientific development. So this is, in my opinion, if you understand some history of philosophy, you should actually read the kind of companion of science, in particular mathematics. Mathematics is quite important. Deleuze theory is also from the Leibniz, the set theory. The Allen-Body also, the Cantor's set theory. And even Lacan is actually rely on the kind of the function, and then differential, the mathematics. So that's why actually the French philosophy without the mathematics cannot be fully understood. It's not a rhetoric. It's trying to actually, negotiate the kind of problem at least with the mathematics and the contemporary, scientific, the theory. That's why actually it doesn't mean that they actually, they regarded philosophy as a supplement to the theory, supplement to the science, but the independent, balance, which come along with what equal relation to science. So artificial intelligence these days really want, I think in my opinion, what happening at the moment in terms of artificial intelligence and ChatGPT is quite problematic because this seems a little bit too much inclined to scientific dogmatism, right? And the scientists and engineers do not actually listen to actually philosophy. And of course, philosophy is a problem also big, but anyway, just we need to actually philosophy with science and then vice versa. Science also needs philosophy, and also we philosophy also needs science. Is that answer? I guess we have one more time for one last question. Yes, Professor Trujillo.
Good morning. I'm Professor Williams from the Department of History and Philosophy. It struck me that you quoted Eric Hobsbawm at the beginning of your talk and related him to the whole philosophy of postmodernism. But in one book that he wrote, he actually critiqued postmodernism as an idealist and not really providing any alternative to what he criticized. What is your take on that?
Okay, yeah, thank you for question. So of course, there's that, I know there's the critique, and then I think that critique is quite common. So even today, you can see Gabriel Lopez and then Stephen Best and then many, even British Marxists, to criticize postmodernism. That's why I'm quite hesitant to use this term, because this term is too much overused and we're abused by this kind of some debate. But what I mean is postmodernism is some sort of the aesthetic, the term. What I mean actually it's kind of aesthetic, the formalism. It's aesthetic formalism. So it doesn't actually have some kind of implication of political, sense. That's what I'm thinking. Postmodernism. So it's a kind of some sort of descriptive word to what I mean actually the sort of political movement. I told you that what is the modern? We should actually define the modern first. Then this actually modernity has a lot of problems. But this modernity also actually the implies this sort of a postmodern the moment. So for instance, this postmodern must be understood a kind of very descriptive word. Not really. I use this word to indicate some kind of the proper scientific concept. By which we understand a certain sort of phenomenon, something like that. Why? To my experience, I went to the Malacca, one of the Asian cities in Malaysia, right? I think around 2006. There was the first time for me actually to visit, any city in Southeastern Asia. I went there and I actually found some street called Street of Harmony. And I could see a lot of old temples, all kinds of temples. It's Muslim, Hinduism, and then Catholic and Protestant, Buddhism. All the religion was gathered there. And then in the middle of the street, I found some city gallery of the Malacca. And I went into the gallery. I saw that some kind of imagined, the painting. Very actually the interesting painting on the entrance. I saw that it actually struck to me. It actually describes the scene of the ancient. It's not really ancient. It's medieval. The Malacca. It's a scene of the medieval Malacca. And then you can see that. Think about it. It's 16th century when the Portuguese arrived in Malacca. It describes the moment Portuguese European arrived to Chisholm Malacca. And what did they see in the Malacca? That painting showed that. Quite interestingly, a lot of actually people like me in those days, the Portuguese arrived, to find the primitive, landscape. Nobody stands. But in opposite, so what in the Portuguese discovered there was not no man's land, but the many man's land. Chinese, Malay, the Filipino, Indonesian, Korean, even the Arabian people, Russian people there. And many actually trading people, gathered to trade something. So exactly, this is what happened in the so-called, modernity, Asia modernity. Now, Portuguese arrived where? Typically postmodern, space. You know what I mean? And then actually Europeans arrived at place where modernity cannot, categorize. In my opinion, so what is postmodernism? Postmodernism must be understood, the effect of globalization. And then also as the graduate speaker pointed out, they cannot understand meaning of Asiatic model production, what they actually trying to define. But he left, behind. He couldn't discuss it, right? And then graduate speaker, pointed out, Asiatic model production, that means we Asians had no language to define ourselves. Even Marx couldn't give us the language. Even Marxism cannot give us language to define ourselves. Who are we? That is a postmodern movement within the actually modernity. I don't think that postmodernism is actually kind of what I mean actually too much what I said American oriented some overused the healthcare. I don't think like it's actually it could indicate some kind of reality. And then we need, if you are really serious about this, the situation, you must question what kind of reality, that this term postmodernism tries to, clarify. It tries to clarify something unknown, but incomprehensible. This is what I mean. So if we said postmodernism or postmodern movement, that is what I mean. The comprehensibility within the modernity. And then this actually incompatibility actually continuously produces a difference of modernity. So this is modernity, meaning of modernity. And always implicates, embrace this postmodern movement. This is what I understand.
Once again, let us give Dr. Lee a round of applause. Thank you, Dr. Lee, for our questions for today. So before we formally end today's event, may I invite the Dean of the College of Social Sciences to present our tokens of appreciation to Dr. Lee. Okay. So first of all, we have the certificate of appreciation. It's given to Professor Alex Lee, PhD, for sharing his expertise and invaluable insights to the students and faculty of the College of Social Sciences through his lecture, Theory of Society and Postmodern Epistemology. Given this 30th day of August, 2023, College of Social Sciences, University of the Philippines, Baguio. Signed by the Dean herself and yours. So thank you all for being here today and engaging with us in this intellectually stimulating discourse. Remember that the pursuit of knowledge and the understanding of society are vital for progress and a better future. Let us carry the insights we have gained here tonight and continue to explore and question the complexities of our contemporary world. So once again, thank you so much for attending.
Or